Okay, thank you. I think now it's recording, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anyhow, hopefully I have not lost too much. So this is the form for chi. And now, as I said, that because we can only observe chi at a fixed radial distance, okay, we'll go to the polar coordinates, spherical polar coordinates. Okay. So instead of using the x, I'll use the r theta phi variable. Okay. And for us, r will be chosen so that r equal to 0 for us. Okay. R corresponds to r equal to 0. And CMB comes from r on the last scattering surface. Now, this also will try to express in the polar coordinates. Okay. So k I label, okay, this vector k I label as k times sine theta k cos phi k sine theta k sine phi k and cos theta k. Is this clear? Okay. So I'm labeling x in the polar coordinates. I'm labeling k in the polar coordinates. Okay. So given any variable like delta t over t, this is a relationship between the Fourier transform variable and the original variable. So now the idea is that we will try to express this in terms of these variables. And for this, one relation that I'm going to write down will be very useful. And you probably have seen this in your course in quantum mechanics when you were studying scattering theory. So e to the I k dot x has a nice expansion, which is 4 pi sum over L equal to 0 to infinity, sum over m equal to minus L to L, minus I to the L, y ln theta phi, y ln theta k phi k star and JL of kr. So JL of kr is the spherical Bessel function. So this is an identity. If you have seen it, you may recognize it. If you haven't seen it, okay, we can probably look up some books on special functions, but this is a standard identity that one can use, that one normally uses while dealing with scattering theory, for example. In quantum mechanics, where you have an incident wave, you want to decompose it into the plane wave basis, into the spherical wave basis, and this is the way one does it. So the idea is that we will try to write this in this expansion. Is this clear? Are there questions? Okay. So once you substitute this here, okay, you see that chi of x, okay, will be given by say sum over Lm, okay, y Lm theta phi. So theta phi arguments are correspond to x, okay, and then some quantity which I'll call chi Lm. Okay, and I'll write down the expression for chi Lm that's by using this formula. So chi of r theta phi has the structure sum over Lm, chi Lm, y Lm theta phi. And from what I wrote down, chi Lm will be given by integral d cube k over 2 pi cube okay. Let me write this again. This chi k, okay, which I have already written, this is Fk, okay, I'm dropping the T argument from here, and Ri Kt star. Okay, so that's what we are going to substitute. Okay, Fk times Ri Kt star. So we get Fk. Oh, I should have said something else. Okay, let me go back to the first slide. Okay. You see here, okay, this is a scalar quantity. This is also a scalar quantity. And here I have written is a Fkt. Okay. But Fkt, of course, depends on the background space-time, but that's rotational invariant. Okay. So because of the rotational invariance, this quantity is guaranteed to be a function only of the magnitude of k. So k is mod k. This is due to rotational invariance. Okay, and this will be useful information. Okay. The fluctuations are of course not rotational invariance. Okay. But fluctuations, it's already first order in fluctuation. Ri and chi are both first order in fluctuation. So here we only need to take into account the effect of the background. And because background is rotational invariant, it's clear that F cannot depend on the direction of k. Okay, it can only depend on the magnitude. Okay, so I'll write this as k by definition is the magnitude of k. Is this point clear? Okay. So for example, the relationship between phi b and Ri was 3/5 Ri, right? Phi b was 3/5 Ri. Now in general, once you have a momentum dependence, okay, then it could have a complicated dependence on k, but nevertheless, it's clear that it should depend only on the magnitude of k, right? In fact, the equations that we have written down earlier involving the scalars, okay, did have k, but it came through this combination k square. And similarly, when you try to relate the temperature fluctuation to these fluctuations in phi b, psi b, zeta, and r, okay, any such relation will involve only a function of k at most, the function of magnitude of k. Okay, so that because of this, let me drop that vector sign here also. So at this stage itself, I'm going to drop the vector and write this as f of k. Is this clear? Are there questions? Okay, we'll see that this will be useful because this will allow us to do the angular integral. Okay, so this is Ri k star, and then we have all these factors 4 pi minus I to the L YLM theta k pi k star JLKR. Okay, let me just check that I have not missed anything. Okay, in the previous slide. Okay. So this 4 pi minus I to the L, this YLM theta phi of course has gone into the definition. Okay, here YLM theta phi has gone here. And yeah, everything else is here. Okay, YLM theta k phi k star JLKR. So given this, let's now calculate chi LM. Let me just put a T here, even though I have not been writing. Chi L prime M prime T. So this will involve a double integral. So this will be integral d cube k over 2 pi cube d cube k prime over 2 pi cube. Okay, I forgot to do one thing. I'll just put a star here, complex conjugation. It doesn't really matter because this will typically have a simple relation with respect to chi LM, because you can see from here the reason that I have put a chi of course is real, okay, but chi LM can be complex because YLM is complex, right? It has this vector to the ILM. But chi L prime M prime star basically related to chi L prime minus M, right? Because what the complex conjugation does is to take the e to the im phi and makes it into e to the minus im phi. So that's the only change, and at most some additional phase. Okay, so this is there. Then we have fk mod square. Sorry, fk phi prime star. It's not mod square yet. fk prime star. Okay, these are of course there is t dependence here. Okay, in general. Then you have 16 pi square minus I to the power L minus L prime YLM theta k phi k YL prime M prime theta k prime phi k prime star. Then JL KR JL prime K prime R. Okay, JL is real. And then we have the 2-point function of Ri K P star Ri K prime P star. T star, but that is because Ri in position space was the real variable. This is just Ri of minus K prime T star. Okay, because Ri is real in position space. Now this one we have calculated earlier. Okay, and if you remember the result, okay, in fact we had defined something. We call this 2 pi cube delta cube k minus k prime. Okay, the minus sign is simply because there's a minus here. Okay. And then whatever is left, we call it PR, the scalar power spectrum, PR of k. Okay. So you are going to substitute this, okay, and write in terms of PR of k. Because of this delta cube k minus k prime, things simplify because k prime simply becomes equal to k. Okay. And the 2 pi cube here cancels the 2 pi cube here. So the only factors of 2's and pi's that are left is the 16 pi square and 2 pi cube in the denominator. So that gives a 2 over pi. So let me write it. So chi Lm of T, chi L prime M prime T star. There will be 2 over pi. Then integral d cube k. D cube k I'm not going to write. I'm going to write as k square dk sine theta k d theta k d phi k. Okay, this is a spherical polar coordinate for k. Then now we have, you see here, k prime is the same as k. So this I can write as mod fk square. K prime is the same as k. So this is JL kr, JL prime kr. And then we have this thing. Okay, let me write one more step. So mod fk square I to the power L minus L prime JL of kr, JL prime of kr. Okay, R is fixed, right? That's the last scattering surface. So let me, so R is basically R of Ls. Okay, and we'll write down a formula for it later. What else you have? You have the YLMs, right? YLM theta k phi k, YLM prime theta k prime phi k prime star. But because k prime and k are the same, this argument gets changed to theta k phi k. So you have YLM theta k phi k y L prime M prime star theta k phi k star. Is this clear? And now we are going to use the orthonormality of the YLMs, okay, to do the theta k phi k integral, and you get just delta LL prime, delta MM prime. So this gives you 2 over pi delta LL prime, delta MM prime, integral k square dk fk mod square GL. Now, because L is equal to L prime, I can just write the JL kr square. And that's it.
There's a factor coming from the correlation function, right?
Oh yeah, correlation function, PR.
Yeah.
PR of k. Okay, 2 pi cube has gotten cancelled. So what happened to the other? Yeah, this 2 over pi is the 1 2 pi cube and 1 16 pi square combined. So I think this is everything that we have.
There's also a factor of 4 pi because you change the d cube integral to k square dk. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
that went into sine theta k d theta k d phi k, right?
Yeah.
See, this integral would have given 4 pi, but now it's giving just delta LL prime, delta MM prime. Because YLM definition has a 1 over square root of 4 pi, right?
Yeah.
There's just a PR of k in the first line also.
Yes, PR of k in the first line. Okay, let me write it here. Okay, is this okay? Are there questions? So this one is calculated directly. Okay? So let me write this as CL chi delta LL prime delta MM prime. Okay, where CL chi is 2 over pi So this can be experimentally measured.
Sir?
Yes.
The only information that we have about PRK is for those value of K which exited the horizon, right?
Yes, and that's more or less everything that you observed today.
But here, I mean, K, the value integral over K runs from 0 to infinity, right?
Yeah, but we'll see that basically this is peak, so you don't really need the values of K elsewhere.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, because for JLKR is highly peaked. So you really need at specific value of K or around a specific value of K. Okay, any other question? Okay, so this is measured experimentally. So let me again be specific about how we measure it. So this is the correlation function of chi, right? Chi LM, chi L prime, M prime. Okay. So what is this? Chi LM, chi L prime, L prime. Okay, so chi LM of R, chi L prime, M prime. R. Okay, so this is measured at last scattering. Okay, so at T equal to TLS. So this is given in terms of the R theta phi correlation function. So you can write this as d theta, sine theta d theta d phi, sine theta d theta d phi, sine theta phi. I had a star here, right? So let me put a star here. So YLM theta phi star, YL prime M prime, theta prime phi prime, and then chi r theta phi chi r theta prime phi prime. Okay. So this is what we measured. We just calculate say delta t over t at one point in at angle theta phi, delta t over t at the angle theta prime phi prime, take the product. And then average, okay, I'll explain what the average is of what. And then you just integrate over theta phi, theta prime, phi prime by using this. So this gives you chi lm or chi L prime r star, right? Because that's just the inversion of this formula. Where we defined chi lm. Yeah, just inverting this formula, right? Multiply by y lm star and then integrate over theta and phi. So once we know the fluctuation of chi, right? Like delta t over t, we can calculate these 2-point functions. Now, what is this average over? So this average you can think of. I mean, ideally you would have fixed theta phi, theta prime, phi prime, and would have done the averaging over many universes. But of course, you don't have many universes. So this is the average over different orientation of the coordinate system. So in other words, you choose a coordinate system, okay, sitting on the Earth, okay, call something XYZ axis. Okay. With respect to the XYZ axis, you identify the points theta phi and theta prime phi prime in the sky and calculate this product. Okay. Then you choose a different orientation. Okay. Call that your new XYZ axis. Again, identify the same points theta phi and theta prime phi prime. Okay. And then average over all choice of orientation. Right? That's what this average, that's how the average is calculated. Okay, that's what it means by this average. So once you know how to calculate how to look at the temperature or any variable for that matter, delta t over t is the simplest one. In different directions in the sky, we can calculate this object. And this then we can compare with what we had here, which is here, right? CL chi chi. So you can calculate CL chi chi. So that means CL chi chi can be measured, and then you can use this to check this formula. Okay, if somebody gives you a model of inflation which can calculate PR of K, we can calculate CL chi chi and compare with experiments. So CL chi chi can be measured. Okay, so now we are going to study what does inflation tell us about CL chi chi, right? What kind of L dependence it has, for example. Here the only thing that it depends on is L basically, right? Once you fix your chi, right, that's the only argument, because the point where you measure, the R of course is fixed at last scattering surface, right? The time is fixed because the time is the time of last scattering. So you can only study it as a function of L, and that's what we do in experiments. Are there questions?
So would you explain what the averaging is again?
Yeah, so the averaging is over different orientation. I mean, okay, roughly physically what it means is that this should depend only on the arc length, right? If you average over many universes, then this should depend only on the arc length that covers between theta prime, phi prime, and theta phi. Okay, because that's the rotational invariant combination.
Yeah.
But because you cannot average over many universes, you fix the arc length and average over different directions. Physically, that's the average. But the way I stated it is that you fix your theta phi and theta prime phi prime, and then we average over all orientation of the axis, right? So if you take a different orientation, then a given space-time, a given point in the sky, on the last scattering surface, will have different values of theta phi and theta prime phi prime. Conversely, if you fix your theta phi and theta prime phi prime and change your orientation of the coordinate axis, that actually corresponds to a different pair of points in the sky. but separated by the same arc length. And that's what you average over different orientations of your coordinate system.
The output is still a function of theta and phi, right?
The output will be essentially a function of the arc length once you average.
Yeah.
Right? And that is what is capturing, okay, the fact, that this is supposed to be delta LL prime, delta MM prime, right? This is analog of momentum conservation in space.
Yeah.
So this is the analog of momentum conservation. In this case, it's the rotational invariance. Okay? And by averaging over these different orientations, you are essentially forcing rotational invariance. Right? You are forcing the fact that this quantity can only depend on the arc length, because you have already averaged over different directions in the sky, right? So it cannot depend on anything else by construction. So this average, okay, automatically produces delta LL prime, delta MM prime factor, right? That's just the consequence of the fact that you are actually averaging over all directions, all orientations. But this is a non-trivial information, the CL chi-chi, the expression for CL chi-chi.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? Okay. So let me emphasize again that this averaging essentially ensures that this two-point function depends only on the arc length. Okay, that separates theta phi and theta prime phi prime. And it's an easy exercise to show that once that is the case, then this integral will automatically produce delta LL prime, delta MM prime. Okay, so let me then go back again, CL chi chi. And PRK, if you remember, we had labeled it as 2 pi square over k cube delta S square of k. Okay. And what we had found is that the inflation suggests that delta S of k should be a slowly varying function of k. This should be a slowly varying function of k. Okay, in fact, the variation comes only because of that spectral index, or the 1 minus the spectral index. Okay, and that's proportional to Slorod parameter. Okay, so this is a slowly varying function. This one, for super horizon perturbation, for perturbations that are super horizon, at TLS should be slowly varying. For example, the delta T over T, right, whose major component comes from this phi b, right, gravitational redshift. That phi b is just 3/5 times r, right? So the f of k is 3/5 in that case, right? It doesn't depend on k in this approximation. In general, we expect f of k to be slowly varying for super horizon perturbations. We'll see that this will change for sub horizon perturbations, but at least for super horizon perturbations, we expect this to be slowly varying. This, on the other hand, is a rapidly varying function of k for large L. So JLKR varies rapidly with k for large L, and it peaks around, I think, KR of order L. So K is L over R. Around KR. The argument is KR, right? KR of order L. So K is L over R. So for large L, we can write CL chi chi for L large. Okay, of course, you can calculate this for small L also. And as Harshit was saying, that you may miss a small part of this integral because those haven't exited the horizon, but those are very small contributions anyway, right? So you don't really need to worry about it. Anyway, so let's look at large L. Okay, so this is given by 2 over pi, and because of this, okay, because these are slowly varying, I can just pull these things out. Okay, f of k square and delta s square k by substituting k equal to L over R, because the rest of the integral is sharply peaked around k equal to L over R. Okay. So I can write this as f of L over R square, then delta s square of L over R. Okay, 2 over pi and 2 pi square I can combine into 4 pi. So let's do that. 4 pi. And then we have integral 0 to infinity dk over k JL of kr whole square. Okay, I just pulled out. So this 1 over k cube and k square gave 1 over k. This is JL of k r whole square. So this integral can be done. Okay, in fact, you can just write kr equal to rho and get d rho over rho JL of rho whole square. Okay, so it only depends on L. And its value is, I think it's an exact result. Okay, but you can say, look up some table of integrals. This is what I have is 1 over 2 L into L plus 1. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this in a slightly different way in the next slide. So this 2 cancels this 2 from this factor. So this becomes 2 pi. So I'll write this as L into L plus 1 CL is equal to 2 pi mod f of L over R square. I think I had somehow dropped the mod, but it should have been written as mod. And this one is a slowly varying function of L. Okay, but this, of course, this formula, okay, this is a slowly varying function of L, provided L over R is less than lambda h at the time of last scattering. Why? This is k, right? This was the argument k. And we have seen that if at the time of last scattering, you have to be super horizon, then k should be smaller than lambda h. Okay, this is the condition that the perturbation remains super horizon at TLS. So L should be large, but L shouldn't be as so large that this condition is violated. Okay, and we'll now check what range of L corresponds to this condition. Is this clear? Are there questions? Okay, so the question is what range of R or L corresponds to L over R less than lambda h. So let's see what is R. So R is determined is simply from the metric that as from the last scattering time to today, dt over lambda t is basically R, right? And that basically follows from the fact that dr square minus lambda t square, sorry, lambda t square dr square equal to dt square along non-geodesic. Okay, this is the light travel path. So you just integrate from R, you integrate from 0 to the time of last scattering, and this you integrate from the time of last scattering to today's time. Okay? That's how you get this relation. Anyway, so this determines R, but it will not be very important for us, okay, because we are going to use the knowledge that we have. We have done some calculation earlier, and we are going to use that knowledge. Okay? And that knowledge is the following, that we recall that at t equal to TLS, the horizon or the apparent horizon, okay, without counting the inflation, okay, which in fact is of order lambda h, sorry, lambda inverse h inverse. This spans 2-degree angle in the sky. So this means that lambda inverse h inverse over the full circumference 2 pi r should be 2-degree over 360 degree. Is that clear? So this means lambda h is 180 over 2 pi r. Okay, or lambda inverse h inverse is 2 pi r over 180. That's roughly r over 30. Right? Because 2 pi is like 6, so this is r over 30. Now let's look at this condition. L over r is less than lambda h. So L over r should be less than 30 over r. And this means L should be less than 30. So we expect that when L is large enough, but not more than 30, then the CL, L into L times 1, L into L plus 1 times CL should be almost flat. Is this clear? So I'm going to write the conclusion. So L into L plus 1 times CL should be almost flat. for L large, but there is enough. Is this clear? Are there questions? I should just add as an aside that L equal to 1, right, which is a dipole. This is not observable, unfortunately. Since it is used okay, so L equal to 1 is dipole asymmetric. Okay, fluctuation is a dipole, but this one is affected by our local motion, right? We are moving in certain directions. So there is already an asymmetry. So L equal to 1 we cannot observe, but higher L we can observe. Okay, so here is what we see. So basically what one finds is that it's more or less flat. And then it starts oscillating. Okay. So this part is a direct signal that indeed we had a scale or more or less scale invariant perturbation. Because the delta R or delta S being almost independent of K is the statement of scale invariance, right? The fact that delta S is independent of L over R is the statement of scale invariance. And indeed, the flatness that you see there is a statement of that. What we need to explain is what these peaks are. Okay, and that's what I'll try to explain in the rest of the class, where the peaks are coming from. I'll give the qualitative explanation, but the calculations are more or less straightforward. So I'll tell you how to do the calculation and then leave the actual calculation to you. Are there questions? So to explain the oscillations, we need to and study them without making the K square Okay. So let me write these equations again, okay, which you have seen many times, but you have to see it once more. So 3h, so the first equation was 3h psi b dot plus h phi b. Okay, I'm just setting sigma tilde equal to 0 from the beginning. That is still true. And similarly, I'll set p equal to 0. So zeta dot is minus pi, where pi, let me, it's capital pi. Okay. So when we could eliminate the case, we solved it in one particular way. Okay, but now we are going to not ignore the case, and we'll try to solve this in a different way. So first 3 is simple. Okay. That sets psi b equal to phi b. Okay, so I can just eliminate psi b altogether. Then I'm going to use 1. You see, so once you substitute psi b as phi b, right, 1 gives you zeta in terms of phi b and phi b dot. So 1 gives zeta in terms of phi b dot. And similarly, 2 gives r in terms of phi b dot. And now the idea is that we are going to substitute this 1, the expression for zeta in terms of phi b and phi b dot, into 4. Substitute into 4. So what do you expect? Zeta is a linear combination of phi b and phi b dot. So once you substitute into 4, you see there's a zeta dot. So that will get a term. That will be a linear combination in general of phi b double dot, phi b dot, and phi b. And on the right hand side, we have zeta, which is a function of phi b dot and phi b, and psi b is the same as phi b. So what we have at the end then is a differential equation that involves phi b only, but it's a second order differential equation for phi b, right? Because it has a phi b double dot, and that comes because you have a zeta dot here, and zeta in turn is a linear combination of phi b dot and phi b. Is this point clear? So the upshot of this is an equation for phi b of the form in general, A and B are time dependent, right? But that what they are, you can determine from this, right? I mean, it's absolutely straightforward algebra. Okay. In fact, algebra is also not very complicated because it's just linear relation. Okay. So you can easily work out what A and B are by using this. Now, this one you can see looks like a damped harmonic oscillator, damped oscillator. Okay. Of course, the damping as well as the force it can be time dependent. Okay, but let's not worry about this. So damped oscillator. For super horizon case, for super horizon effectively, the last term vanishes, last term is small. And phi b dot goes to 0 at late time. Okay, which means phi b goes to constant. So when we try to solve this, we can put the boundary condition at the re-entry point, okay, for sub-horizon perturbations. Use the boundary condition that at t equal to t re-entry, phi b dot is 0 and phi b was some constant multiple of r, right? This is equal to some c times ri, remember? Where c was 3/5 if the re-entry happened in the matter dominated era, and it's something else if it happened in a radiation dominated era. Okay, so some constant. Which you can calculate. So this is the initial condition. Phi b is some value and phi b dot equal to 0. And then once the perturbations enter the horizon, okay, when b becomes significant, then phi b starts to oscillate, right? Because this is like a damped oscillator. So let me draw phi b versus time roughly. So it was like more or less constant. Okay, of course, it jumps as you go from one era to another, but let's draw the last era. And then at re-entry, so this is for t re-entry, it starts to oscillate. Is this clear?
Sir, but after perturbation has, re-entering the horizon, then even the classical equations are not valid, right? Because that's what we saw.
Yeah, so the classical equations are still valid because the quantum fluctuations, okay, one can show are really tiny. Okay? So this k square effect that we are seeing, right? This is in fact the effect of interaction between the interaction terms. Okay, it's still classical, okay? But it's still that the interaction terms are becoming important, right? The interaction between matter and gravity. Because if you look at the previous slide, that k square dependent terms, right? These basically reflect the fact that the matter is back reacting on gravity. Because your question, for example, if you remember, you asked last time, right? Why we don't have second derivative? And indeed, in gravity, you don't expect second derivative, okay? Because gravity doesn't have a fluctuating scalar degree of freedom. But the reason that you have a second derivative is because matter is fluctuating. So the matter and gravity start interacting. So even though it's classical, okay, you can of course ask about quantum fluctuations, but those are actually very small. You can check that at this late time. But it's the classical dynamics, okay, that starts affecting, that starts becoming relevant after the horizon entry. And there are further thermal fluctuations that you also need to take into account. But just within the equations, we already see that there's a dominant effect which is coming from the equations that we have written down.
Okay.
So the reason that it's becoming important is because of the interaction between matter and gravity, okay, which are suppressed for the super horizon perturbations. Okay, that's another way of seeing why these terms didn't contribute earlier. Okay, so phi starts to oscillate, but now we can ask, how does it translate to what we see on the last scattering surface? Effect on phi at TLS. So here you see the phi b starts to oscillate as a function of time. But that, of course, directly has no relevance because TLS is fixed, right? We are not going to vary TLS. TLS is fixed. Nevertheless, okay, these oscillations, one can will now try to argue, that actually translates to oscillations in K and hence in L. Okay, and let's see how it happens. So suppose T re-entry is equal to TLS. Okay. In that case, phi b is at its maximum at TLS. Right? Because at the re-entry point, it starts from the maximum and then it gets damped. Then it starts oscillating and then it gets damped. Now, as I said, TLS cannot be varied, but T re-entry depends on K. Right? Because it solves this K equal to lambda H equation. Okay, and T dependence is here, right? Lambda depends on time. Okay, H also depends mildly on time. So T dependence is here. So that's what makes T as K dependent, T re-entry. So it may happen, okay, that as you vary K, the T re-entry is such that at TLS, phi b is at its minimum. Right? So let me write this, or 0. Okay, so suppose K is such that the following picture holds. So this, of course, is universal. That this is T re-entry. and this is TLS. Again, TLS is not changing, it's fixed. But as you vary K, the re-entry time is changing. And as a result, it may happen that as you vary K, okay, re-entry time as it changes, okay, as it say recedes further and further back from TLS, for some values of K, phi v may be 0 at TLS, in which case the fluctuation has no effect. For some values, phi v may be at its minimum, in which the fluctuation will have negative effect. And at the maximum, the fluctuation will have positive effect. So because of this feature, this oscillation of phi b, okay, which you can easily work out from this formula. Okay, once you determine A and B, okay, by going through it carefully, you can determine the oscillation of phi b. Okay, it of course depends on K, and the re-entry time also depends on K. Okay, where you put the boundary condition. Okay. But the net result is that phi b at TLS oscillates as function of K. And this basically means that all the other things also oscillate. Psi b, zeta. Right? Because these are all determined in terms of phi b and its first derivative, right? So these also oscillate. As function of K. And that you can translate to this oscillation in L over R, right? Because when you calculate the CL, times L into L plus 1, what's the CL? Okay, we saw this. So these oscillations, these all result from this effect. So in formula, in the equation, what oscillates is this one. FKTLS oscillates as function of K. And since we are supposed to evaluate f of L over R TLS, this oscillates as function of L. Is this clear? So f is a function that relates the phi b, psi b, r, and zeta at the time of last scattering to Ri, right? What happened during inflation. And that requires solving this equation. So f encodes the effect of solving this equation or the effect of this oscillation. So this oscillation was in time, but f is evaluated at fixed time, okay, TLS. But what we argued from here is that this oscillation in phi b can be translated to an oscillation in f as a function of K. And this is precise. You can work out how the form of this function f, once you know these coefficients A and B, right, which of course you can calculate from here. And this gives a well-defined algorithm to determine f. If not analytically, you can always evaluate numerically, because you know how p bar and rho bar changes as a function of time. Okay, so all you have to do is to put that in here, in these equations, and solve these equations to see how phi b depends on time with this boundary condition. And that can be translated to calculate f, and you can easily see that f will oscillate as a function of K.
Sir, F was linking the observable to R.
Yes, and the observable is linked to phi b, psi b, r, and zeta at TLS.
Yeah, but like it depends upon the observable in the sense that.
Yes, certainly, certainly. Right? But that relation is simple, right? Because locally, if you fix t, right, then delta t over t, for example, will always be phi b, right? To first approximation, the gravitational redshift effect. So that relation is simple, right? That's determined by the local physics. So the oscillation comes because you have to evolve these functions phi b, psi b, etc. from the time of horizon re-entry to the time of last scattering.
Yeah.
So indeed, it is true that you have to do some work. That will also depend on what observable you are measuring, right? If it's simple like delta t over t, you can write a simple expression, right? The first approximation, right? Then of course you have to look at the various corrections, various possible corrections that may come. And then the main part of the task is to see how those variables, phi b, psi b, etc., at the time of last scattering are actually related to Ri.
Yeah.
Any other question? Now, so far we have only seen one observable, right? So one can ask what are the various observables you're talking about, delta t over t. But one important set of observables is what is called the fluctuation in the polarization, right? When you talk about delta t over t, right, you measure CMB of any polarization, right? You just calculate the total temperature of the photons that are coming in. But of course, you can do final measurement. Okay, you can look at the temperature of photons of one polarization versus the photons of another polarization, right? And in general, it may happen that they have different temperature, right? The Planck distribution for photons that are coming from a particular direction may be different for a different kind of polarization. So that fluctuation in polarization is another observable. And in fact, maybe we'll discuss it later in these lectures, that those fluctuations in polarizations are an appropriate mode of the fluctuations in polarizations contain information about tensor perturbation. So when we say that people are looking for tensor perturbation or they have not found any tensor perturbation, the way they look for tensor perturbations is by looking at a particular mode of fluctuation of the polarization. It's like the same two-point function. Is that the observable that you are considering is not simple as delta t over t, but delta t over t associated with fixed polarization. But this we'll discuss later in these lectures. Okay, I think we'll not start anything new today. So I'll stop here. Are there questions? Okay, if not, I'll stop here. But let me just remind you that you should try to do this exercise. Okay, it's just somewhat complicated algebra, but it's straightforward. Okay, basically substitute this zeta in terms of phi b from this into this equation and try to write down the equation for phi b, right? The second order differential equation for phi b. Okay, and then if you are, if you want to do it, you can try to solve it even numerically to see how actually phi b evolves as a function of time. And you will see that as you vary k, right, there is a qualitative difference between what happens when k is less than lambda h and k is larger than lambda h. Okay, so I'll stop and we'll meet tomorrow.